The Ashen Contract. It was 11 o'clock at night. The castle-style master bedroom was drowned in pitch darkness, save for a faint, dim glow spilling from the floor lamp. Layla curled up on the soft velvet king-sized bed, trapped within the gilded cage that was Blackwood Manor. It had been 3 years since Kaelan had brought her here. 3 years of captivity, all because her face was an exact replica of Isolde, his long-adored moonlight. Stepping sounds echoed through the silent corridor, steady, deep, and laced with an overpowering sense of dominance. The door swung open. A cold gush of wind carrying the damp chill of the rainy night swept into the room, snuffing out the last traces of warmth. Kaelan walked in. He was dressed in a tailored black haute couture suit, his tall frame lean and imposing with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. His features bore the impeccable, striking bone structure of a pure-blooded European aristocrat, high chiseled nose, deep storm blue eyes, and thin lips perpetually pressed into a cold, unyielding line. He exuded an untouchable, frigid aura. Yet those stunning eyes held no warmth, only frozen indifference and a trace of obsessive madness. He had just returned from an overseas gala, his body still carrying the faint cool scent of whiskey, and the detached remoteness that clung to him like a second skin. Layla's fingers tightened instinctively around the bed sheets. She bowed her head, not daring to meet his gaze. She knew all too well. Every night, when he came back, she was forced to play the role of another woman. Kaelan walked slowly to the bedside, staring down at the girl beneath him. His deep eyes traced every line of her face, dazed and possessive. The resemblance was uncanny. Every curve of her brows, the shape of her eyes, even the gentle, submissive tilt of her head was identical to the Isolde who had vanished from his life 3 years ago. "Look up." His voice was low, magnetic, and laced with uncompromising command, icy to the core. Layla trembled slightly and lifted her head. Her fair, delicate face and watery hazel eyes were soft and vulnerable, a perfect carbon copy of the woman who haunted his every thought. Kaelan slowly raised his hand, his cool fingertips brushing lightly over her brows, his touch gentle yet fiercely possessive. "Were you good today?" His tone was soft, yet devoid of any tenderness. Layla nodded faintly, her voice barely a whisper. Yes. She did not dare misbehave. 3 years ago, her parents had died in a sudden accident, leaving her completely alone and destitute. Kaelan had found her, pulled her out of the mud of despair, and locked her away in this gilded prison. He had given her luxurious clothes, endless wealth, everything the world craved. Everything except dignity, except his heart. He kept her only to fill the void left by Isolde's absence. She was his shameful substitute, his doll for clinging to his obsession. Kaelan's fingertips slid down to brush her lips, his storm blue eyes darkening with tangled emotion, longing, fixation, and a hidden yearning he refused to acknowledge. "Remember your place, Layla." He leaned down, his breath brushing her ear, every word cold and piercing. "You are nothing but a replacement. Do not dare covet what does not belong to you, least of all my heart." He had repeated this sentence 1,000 times over 3 years, each one slicing through the fragile walls she had built around her heart. A sharp, aching pain spread through Layla's chest, seeping into every inch of her body. She knew. She had always known. But the heart was never rational. 3 years of quiet companionship had made this cold, obsessive man her deepest, most irreversible obsession. She loved him, humbly, foolishly, silently, never daring to speak her truth aloud. "I know." She swallowed the sour ache in her throat and replied softly. Satisfied by her obedience, Kaelan leaned in to kiss her brows, his touch steeped in domineering possession, but no love. He was not kissing Layla. He was kissing the ghost of Isolde hidden behind her face. The intimate, charged atmosphere shattered in an instant when the private phone on the nightstand lit up abruptly. A single text message from an unknown overseas number flashed across the screen, freezing every movement Kaelan made. Kaelan, I'm home. Isolde. The air turned solid and frigid. All lingering warmth and intimacy vanished without a trace, leaving only biting cold. Kaelan's body stiffened completely. The storm blue light in his eyes faded instantly, replaced by overwhelming shock, ecstasy, and ferocious madness. His moonlight, missing for 3 years, had returned. Layla saw every word clearly. In that second, all the blood in her veins turned to ice. She stared numbly at the man before her, witnessing the bright, fervent light in his eyes, a light she had never seen in 3 years, a pure, unmasked love that had never once been hers. He was not born cold. He simply had never loved her. 3 years of substituted tenderness, shattered in an instant. Her entire world collapsed into rubble. Kaelan straightened abruptly, no longer sparing her a single glance. His eyes remained locked on the phone screen, his fingers trembling slightly, a rare display of emotion for the stoic tycoon. He grabbed his coat from the hanger in an instant, turning to leave without hesitation. No farewell, no explanation, not a shred of reluctance. Stay here. Do not leave the manor. The cold command fell flat. The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off their world entirely. Thunder boomed outside, rain lashing violently against the windows. Alone in the vast, icy bed, Layla stared blankly at the ceiling. Hot tears finally spilled uncontrollably, crashing down onto the cold silk sheets. 3 years of secret love, nothing but a joke. His moonlight had returned, and the substitute was meant to fade away. But no one knew, this carefully orchestrated return, this tangled love and lies, was only the beginning. The returning moonlight hid monstrous lies. The cold-hearted man harbored a silent, unspoken love he refused to admit. The docile, fragile substitute would soon shed her gentle shell and rise to fight back. A love filled with hatred, misunderstandings, betrayal, and endless torment had just begun to weave its cruel bond over Blackwood Manor. Chapter 2: The Ghost in the Mirror. The night stretched on endlessly, the torrential rain showing no signs of stopping. The ancient manor stood isolated on the hillside of London's wealthiest district, surrounded by dark forests and endless fog, like a gorgeous and desolate prison isolated from the world. Layla did not move from the bed for the entire night. The lamp was still dimly lit, casting a faint shadow on the luxurious European-style carpet. The room was filled with Kaelan's lingering cold whiskey scent, but his presence had long vanished, leaving only empty coldness. She had cried until her eyes were swollen and sore, until her throat was hoarse and dry. Yet the dull pain in her chest never faded, spreading relentlessly to every nerve in her body. For 3 years, she had accustomed herself to this quiet captivity. She had told herself repeatedly that she was lucky enough. As an orphan with no family, no status, no wealth, being sheltered by Kaelan Blackwood was already a luxury she did not deserve. She had no right to ask for his heart, no right to complain about his coldness, no right to be jealous of the distant Isolde. She had kept her love hidden in the deepest corner of her heart, content with the trivial companionship of every night, foolishly convincing herself that time could wear down his obsession, that one day he would see her, would know her. But tonight, that ridiculous illusion was completely shattered. The moment that text message appeared, she understood everything thoroughly. There was no replacement in true love. There was no slowly moving on. For Kaelan, Isolde was the eternal moonlight in his heart, untouchable and irreplaceable. And she, Layla, was just a cheap fake, a temporary comfort for his lonely years. The first ray of dawn broke through the dark clouds, spilling faint white light through the window and illuminating the tears on her pale cheeks. The rain finally stopped, but the air was still damp and cold. Layla slowly sat up, her limbs stiff from lying motionless all night. She walked barefoot on the soft cashmere carpet, the cold ground seeping into her skin, barely waking her numbed senses. She walked to the oversized floor-to-ceiling mirror in the corner of the bedroom. The mirror was polished bright, clearly reflecting her face, pale, delicate, with watery eyes and soft brows, exactly the face that had trapped her for 3 years. For the first time in 3 years, she hated this face deeply. If she did not have this face, she would not have been taken captive by Kaelan. She would not have tasted the sweetness of false tenderness, nor would she have fallen into this hopeless love and suffered endless pain. She raised her hand, gently touching the outline of her brows and eyes in the mirror, her fingertips trembling slightly. Isolde, she whispered the name softly, her voice hoarse and broken. Who was this woman? In Kaelan's fragmented mentions, in the old photos she had accidentally seen in the study, Isolde was a brilliant, unrestrained, dazzling woman. She was born noble, talented, arrogant and free, the only woman who had ever walked into Kaelan Blackwood's cold heart. 3 years ago, she had suddenly disappeared without a trace. The outside world rumored that she had died in a plane crash, but Kaelan never believed it. He had spent countless manpower and resources searching for her for 3 years, locking Layla by his side as a substitute during her absence. Now she was back. Everything would return to its original track. The fake would eventually be removed, and the true moonlight would return to its throne. A soft knock came from the door, breaking the dead silence of the bedroom. "Miss Layla, you're awake." It was the housekeeper, Mrs. Hale, her voice gentle and cautious. Mrs. Hale was the only person in this huge manor who had ever shown her a little kindness. She had watched Layla stay trapped here for 3 years, knowing her helplessness and grievance, but she was just a servant, powerless to change anything. Layla turned around, wiping the residual moisture from her eyes calmly, her voice faint, "Come in." Mrs. Hale pushed the door open and walked in, holding a tray with breakfast in her hand. She glanced at Layla's red and swollen eyes, a look of pity flashing across her face, but she did not dare ask more. "Mr. Blackwood left the manor last night, and did not return. He ordered me to tell you that you are not allowed to leave the manor without permission these days, and no outsiders are allowed to visit you." Layla's heart sank slightly. He was guarding her, even restricting her freedom more strictly than before. It was ridiculous. When he needed a substitute, he would pamper her with material comforts. When his true love returned, he would lock her up tightly, afraid that she would tarnish his moonlight. "I understand." Layla nodded lightly, her tone calm without any fluctuation. Mrs. Hale put the breakfast on the dining table aside, hesitated for a moment, and whispered, "Miss, you'd better eat something. No matter what happens, your body is the most important thing." The breakfast was exquisite as always, fresh bread, tender steak, warm milk and delicate desserts, all the top-tier delicacies that ordinary people could never touch in their lifetime. But Layla had no appetite at all. Looking at these luxurious foods, she only felt a piercing irony. This was the cage Kaelan gave her, sumptuous, gorgeous, and airtight. "Thank you, Mrs. Hale." Layla smiled faintly, the smile not reaching her eyes. Mrs. Hale sighed silently, did not persuade further, and turned to leave the bedroom, leaving Layla alone again in the empty huge room. Layla walked to the French window, pushed open the glass door, and stood on the wide balcony. The morning breeze after the rain was fresh and cold, blowing her long hair wantonly. She looked out at the endless green lawn and distant forest of the manor, her eyes empty and desolate. She had stayed here for 3 years, and she had long been familiar with every plant and tree here. She had once naively thought that this place could be her home, but now she finally understood that a cage was always a cage, no matter how gorgeous it was. She did not know where Kaelan had gone last night, nor did she dare to guess. It must be to meet his returning moonlight. They must have endless words to say, endless missing to make up for the 3 years of separation. And she was just an insignificant outsider in their story, a passerby who had occupied Isolde's place for 3 years. Just as Layla was lost in despair, her mobile phone on the bedside table suddenly vibrated. It was a text message from an unfamiliar number, the content simple and provocative. "You have a beautiful face, but it's a pity that it's always been mine to borrow. Thank you for taking care of Kaelan for me these 3 years, little substitute." The signature at the bottom was simply, "I. Isolde." Layla's fingers trembled violently, and her whole body turned cold in an instant. The woman had just returned, and the first thing she did was send her such a humiliating text message. It was a blatant declaration of sovereignty, a deliberate humiliation, and a cold mockery of her 3 years of humble dedication. Layla stared at the line of words for a long time, her eyes gradually turning red, but no more tears fell. She had cried enough last night. From this moment on, she would no longer cry for Kaelan, nor for this ridiculous relationship. She slowly clenched her fingers, her nails sinking deep into her palm, bringing a sharp pain that kept her awake. Since she was destined to be a substitute, destined to be abandoned, she would not leave in such a mess. If Isolde wanted to take back everything, she would let her know that the fake substitute would never be a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. 3 years of captivity, 3 years of secret love, 3 years of grievance and pain, she would take back every bit of it. Chapter 3: The First Confrontation. Kaelan did not return to Blackwood Manor for 3 whole days. During these 3 days, Layla stayed in the manor quietly, obeying his order and never stepping out of the gate. She ate on time, rested on time, and even read the books in the study as usual, calm and peaceful on the surface, as if she had completely let go of everything. Only she knew that every night, she would lie on the bed until midnight, her eyes open, listening to the quiet movement outside the door, waiting for a figure that would never come back. She had deleted Isolde's provocative text message, but those cold and mocking words were deeply engraved in her mind, lingering like a curse. On the evening of the 4th day, the sound of a car engine finally came from the gate of the manor. The luxury black limited edition Rolls-Royce slowly drove into the courtyard, and the bodyguards and servants in the manor stood respectfully on both sides, their atmosphere extremely solemn. Layla was sitting on the sofa in the living room reading a book. When she heard the movement, she slowly raised her head, her expression calm and unchanging, no panic, no longing, only a faint indifference. The car door opened. First, Kaelan stepped down from the car. He was still dressed in a neat suit, but the cold tiredness between his brows was obvious. His originally deep and sharp eyes were now stained with a faint weariness, but also a rare softness that had never appeared when facing Layla. Then, a woman got out of the car. She was wearing a red haute couture dress, her figure graceful and slender, her golden wavy hair falling over her shoulders, her facial features bright and dazzling, with a natural noble and arrogant temperament. It was Isolde. Layla's breath paused slightly. She had seen Isolde's photos in Kaelan's hidden photo album. The woman in the photos was young and bright, with unruly eyes. But the Isolde in front of her was more mature, more charming, and more intimidating. Most importantly, their faces were almost identical. But the difference was obvious. Layla was gentle, soft, and humble, like a rose carefully planted in a greenhouse, fragile and obedient. Isolde was arrogant, flamboyant, and sharp, like a blooming poppy, gorgeous and dangerous. Isolde stood beside Kaelan, her eyes sweeping across the living room casually, and finally fell on Layla. A faint, mocking smile lifted the corner of her red lips. She walked over slowly, her high heels stepping on the marble floor, making a clear and powerful sound, as if stepping on Layla's heart step by step. Kaelan followed behind her, his eyes falling on Layla briefly, with a trace of indistinct complexity, but it was quickly covered by indifference. So this is the little substitute you kept for 3 years. Isolde's voice was lazy and charming, with a strong sense of superiority, her eyes staring straight at Layla, sizing her up wantonly. There was no politeness in her words, only blatant humiliation and scrutiny. Layla closed the book slowly, put it on the tea table, stood up gently, and faced Isolde's arrogant gaze without avoiding it. Her voice was calm and clear, "Miss Isolde." She took the initiative to speak, neither humble nor arrogant, without the slightest flinch of the past. Isolde raised her eyebrows slightly, seeming a little surprised by her calmness. She thought Layla would be flustered, jealous, or even humble and begging for mercy, but she did not expect this substitute to be so calm. "You know me." Isolde smiled faintly, walking closer, the scent of luxurious perfume on her body sweeping over. "Mr. Blackwood has mentioned you many times." Layla replied lightly. Kaelan stood aside silently, watching the two women face to face, his deep eyes unpredictable. He had thought that Layla would be sad and lost when she saw Isolde, and he had even prepared cold words to suppress her possible extravagant hopes, but her calmness made his heart faintly irritable. It was as if she had suddenly let go of him, as if the 3 years of entanglement and secret love had never existed. Isolde glanced at Kaelan sideways, then turned back to look at Layla, and said softly, "Since you know who I am, you should know your own identity better. The person Kaelan loves is always me. These 3 years, you're just a consolation toy for him." "I know." Layla nodded frankly, without any disguise or grievance. Her frankness made Isolde's mockery lose its strength in an instant. Isolde's smile faded a little, and she narrowed her eyes. "Since you know, then you should leave here. This manor, this position by Kaelan's side, none of it belongs to you." Layla looked at her quietly, then glanced at Kaelan beside her, and asked softly, "Does Mr. Blackwood want me to leave?" She threw the question to the man who controlled everything. For a moment, all eyes fell on Kaelan. His storm blue eyes fluctuated slightly, looking at Layla's clear and indifferent eyes. For 3 years, this girl had always looked at him with humble and longing eyes, never so calm and distant. The unfamiliar distance made his chest faintly congested and irritable. "You stay for now." Kaelan's voice was low, with an irresistible domineering force. As soon as the words fell, both Isolde and Layla were stunned. Isolde's face turned cold instantly. "Kaelan. What do you mean?" "I'm back, why do you still keep her?" Kaelan looked at her sideways, his tone gentle but firm. "She has no place to go for the time being. Let her stay temporarily. After I arrange a new residence for her, she will leave naturally." His reason was flawless, but no one knew that the real thought in his heart was, he did not want her to leave so quickly. He was used to her existence for 3 years, used to her gentle obedience, used to her waiting for him late at night. Even though he always emphasized that she was just a substitute, he could not adapt to the sudden emptiness without her. Isolde stared at him in disbelief, her eyes full of grievance and anger. 3 years ago, you promised me that you would only love me in your life. Now you keep another woman by your side. Do you know how ridiculous this is? It's just a temporary arrangement." Kaelan soothed in a low voice, his tone soft when facing Isolde, a tenderness that Layla had never enjoyed. Layla stood aside, watching their intimate conversation, watching Kaelan lower his posture to comfort another woman, her heart completely calm, without a trace of pain. The last trace of extravagant hope in her heart was completely extinguished at this moment. She was superfluous after all. "Fine." Isolde took a deep breath, forced down the anger in her heart, and smiled coldly at Layla. "I'll give you a few more days to stay. But remember, don't have any delusions. No one can replace me in Kaelan's heart." Layla nodded slightly, her tone light. "I won't." She had long given up all delusions. From today on, she was no longer the humble substitute who loved Kaelan secretly. She was just Layla, a stranger staying in Blackwood Manor temporarily. Isolde was satisfied with her well-behaved attitude, turned around and took Kaelan's arm, and walked towards the second-floor bedroom intimately, whispering coquettishly, "I've been tired for days after coming back, you accompany me to rest." Kaelan responded in a low voice, his eyes inadvertently glancing at the quiet figure in the living room, a trace of inexplicable complexity flashing across his eyes, but he still turned and left with Isolde. The living room was suddenly empty. Layla stood alone in the gorgeous and luxurious hall, the warm crystal lamp shining on her body, but she felt icy cold all over. She raised her head slightly, looking at the closed bedroom door on the second floor, and slowly curved the corners of her mouth into a bitter and cold smile. The real drama had just kicked off. Chapter 4: Hidden Lies and Unspoken Jealousy. The entire Blackwood Manor fell into a strange delicate atmosphere overnight. Isolde moved into the master bedroom that originally belonged to Kaelan, the room where Layla had stayed for 3 years. All of Layla's daily necessities were quietly moved to the remote guest room on the 3rd floor by the servants, without anyone explaining to her, without any apology. This was the default rule of the manor. The mistress returned, and the substitute had to make way. Layla did not resist or question. She simply packed her few clothes and moved to the cold and simple guest room quietly. The guest room was far away from the main building, with poor lighting and a cold environment, completely different from the luxurious and warm master bedroom. But for Layla, it was the most relaxed place she had lived in 3 years. Far away from Kaelan, far away from the entanglement of love and hate, she could finally breathe freely. In the following days, Isolde completely occupied Kaelan's time and attention. They had dinner together every day, went for walks in the manor's garden together, attended private banquets together, and were intimate and inseparable, like a perfect match made in heaven. Kaelan almost never took the initiative to look for Layla again, let alone have any intimate contact with her. He completely cut off all the past entanglement, returning to the loyal and devoted lover who only loved Isolde. The servants in the manor were all good at reading people's faces. Seeing that the real young mistress had returned, they gradually became perfunctory and even snobbish towards Layla. The exquisite 3 meals a day that were prepared for her on time before became simple and casual. No one took the initiative to tidy her room, and no one cared about her emotions. Mrs. Hale wanted to help secretly, but she was often stopped by other servants, who reminded her in a low voice, "Aunt Hale, don't be silly. Miss Isolde is back. That Layla is just a spare tire. It's useless to be nice to her. Be careful of offending the real young mistress." Thus, Layla became the most marginal person in this huge manor. She ate alone, read alone, walked alone in the garden, quiet and transparent, like a shadow that no one paid attention to. But she never felt wronged or sad. On the contrary, she felt unprecedented calm. She used to be trapped in love, caring about Kaelan's every look and every word, suffering from gains and losses. Now that she had let go, those trivial grievances were no longer worth mentioning. What she didn't expect was that her indifference and alienation would make Kaelan increasingly irritable. At first, Kaelan was satisfied with Isolde's return. He made up for the 3 years of missing time, carefully accompanying her, satisfying all her preferences, and making up for the regret of her sudden departure back then. But slowly, he began to feel a faint emptiness in his heart. He was used to coming home late at night and seeing a faint lamp on in the bedroom, used to seeing a gentle figure waiting for him quietly, used to someone listening to him silently, never questioning, never making trouble. But now, the manor was brightly lit every night, and Isolde would act coquettishly and complain to him, talk about her hard life in the past 3 years, ask for various gifts and compensations, and occupy all his time. It was the life he had longed for, but he felt inexplicably restless. He began to inadvertently look for Layla's figure in the manor. He would glance at the garden after dinner, wanting to see if she was sitting alone on the bench reading a book as usual. He would pass by the third-floor corridor, unslowly slowing down, wanting to hear the faint movement in the guest room. But Layla hid well. She avoided all places where Kaelan and Isolde appeared. As long as they were in the living room, she would stay in the room. As long as they were walking in the garden, she would return to the house quietly. She was deliberately alienating him, cutting off all possible intersections between them. This kind of thorough alienation made Kaelan's heart more and more congested and irritable. He had always thought that Layla's love was cheap and endless, that she would always stay by his side docilely, never leaving, never giving up. But now he realized that even the most humble love would be exhausted. Once she let go, she was more decisive than anyone. On the night of the 7th day after Isolde's return, a conflict finally broke out. It was raining again in London, pattering rain, just like the night Isolde came back. Kaelan sat in the study processing work documents, his mind always wandering, unable to concentrate. Isolde pushed the door open and walked in, holding a glass of red wine in her hand, leaning coquettishly beside him. "Kaelan, accompany me to watch a movie tonight. I haven't watched a movie with you for a long time." Kaelan put down the document, looked at her, and nodded lightly, "Okay." Isolde smiled happily, but her eyes suddenly caught sight of a faint scar on Kaelan's wrist. It was a small scar left 3 years ago, when he was drunk and lost his mind after Isolde disappeared. Isolde's eyes flickered slightly, and she asked casually, "This scar has been here for 3 years, right? Did you suffer a lot when I was away?" Kaelan's eyes dimmed slightly, and he whispered, "It's all over." Isolde leaned on his shoulder, her voice soft and aggrieved. "I'm sorry, Kaelan. I had to leave back then. I had my difficulties. These 3 years abroad, I never had a good day. I missed you every day." She kept talking about her suffering abroad, embellishing her experience, depicting herself as a poor woman who was forced to leave and suffered a lot. But Kaelan did not notice that there were many loopholes in her words. He was immersed in the joy of her return, subconsciously ignoring all the abnormalities. Just as Isolde was acting coquettishly, the servant brought a cup of warm herbal tea to the study. It was the tea that Layla had prepared for Kaelan every night for 3 years, soothing the nerves and relieving fatigue. Isolde's face changed instantly when she saw the tea. She reached out and swept the teacup off the table with a slap. With a crisp sound, the porcelain cup shattered all over the floor, and the warm tea splashed everywhere. "Who asked her to send tea?" Isolde's voice turned cold, her eyes full of jealousy and anger. "Kaelan, you still let her prepare these things for you? Do you still have her in your heart?" Kaelan looked at the broken teacup on the ground, his brows tightly furrowed, and a trace of unhappiness flashed in his eyes. "It's just a cup of tea, don't make trouble." "I'm not making trouble." Isolde raised her voice, her eyes red with grievance. "This is the habit she has developed for you in 3 years. You are used to her taking care of you, aren't you? You are reluctant to let her go, aren't you?" Kaelan was annoyed by her noise, and his tone turned cold. "Isolde, don't be unreasonable." This was the first time he had spoken coldly to her since she returned. Isolde was stunned, then tears fell instantly. "You are blaming me for her sake. Kaelan, you have changed. You don't love me as much as before." The noisy voice spread outside the study, reaching the 3rd-floor guest room accurately. Layla was sitting by the window reading a book, and she heard every word clearly. She closed the book slowly, her expression calm and indifferent. She knew Isolde was deliberately finding fault, knew that she was jealous of the 3 years of habits she had left behind. But she didn't care anymore. Those habits that had been integrated into Kaelan's life were just the traces of her humble dedication in the past. Now that she was leaving, those traces would eventually fade away. Outside the door, Isolde's crying and questioning continued, and Kaelan's helpless soothing voice came from time to time. Layla blocked her ears lightly, leaned back on the chair, and looked at the rainy night outside the window, her eyes quiet and distant. She didn't know that at this moment, Kaelan's heart was no longer as peaceful as it seemed. He was tired of Isolde's endless pestering and quarreling. Compared with her noisy and willful, he suddenly missed Layla's quiet and gentle company. He missed the way she waited for him quietly late at night, missed her obedient and never making trouble, missed her eyes that were full of only him. It was at this moment that Kaelan vaguely realized a terrifying fact. In the 3 years of getting along day and night, he had long unconsciously fallen in love with the substitute he had always despised. He had been deceiving himself with Isolde's shadow, but his heart had long belonged to Layla. It was just that his pride and obsession made him refuse to admit it. Chapter 5: The Truth Behind the Disappearance. The quarrel in the study ended with Kaelan's compromise and apology. He comforted Isolde for a long time, promised to drive Layla away as soon as possible, and promised to cut off all connections with the substitute completely, before Isolde finally stopped crying. But after calming down, Kaelan's heart was filled with unprecedented irritability and confusion. He sat alone in the study late at night, looking at the broken teacup residue on the ground, and the figure of Layla quietly making tea for him unconsciously appeared in his mind. For 3 years, every late night, when he was tired from work, there would be a cup of warm herbal tea on the desk, never missing a day. He had always taken it for granted, even thought it was just the duty of a substitute. But now he realized that no one would silently pay for 3 years for no reason. Only Layla had done so, wholeheartedly and without complaint. Kaelan rubbed his tired brows, his storm blue eyes full of entanglement and self-contradiction. He loved Isolde, that was the belief he had insisted on for many years. But why did his heart ache when he saw Layla's alienated appearance? Why did he panic when she was about to leave? Why did he miss her quiet company more and more? The chaotic thoughts surrounded him, making him unable to distinguish his true heart. The next day, the rain stopped and the weather cleared up. Isolde went out to attend a celebrity tea party alone, saying that she wanted to reconnect with her old friends in the upper-class circle of London. After she left, the manor finally returned to its usual tranquility. Kaelan dismissed all the servants on the excuse of resting, leaving the whole empty manor to himself. He walked slowly to the 3rd floor, standing at the end of the corridor, looking at the closed guest room door. The door was closed tightly, without any sound, quiet as if no one lived there. Kaelan stood there for a long time, his chest congested and uncomfortable. He finally reached out and knocked on the door gently. After a few seconds, Layla's clear voice came from inside, "Come in." Kaelan pushed the door open and walked in. The guest room was simple and clean. Layla was sitting by the window reading a professional financial book, her long hair hanging quietly behind her, her side face delicate and calm, without the slightest humility and flinch of the past. She did not look up when she heard the movement, still staring at the book in her hand, indifferent. Kaelan walked to her side, looking down at her quiet profile, his voice low and hoarse, "You've been avoiding me." It was not a question, but a definite statement. Layla finally raised her head, her hazel eyes clear and calm, without any love or hatred, just like looking at a stranger. "Mr. Blackwood, Miss Isolde is back. We should keep a distance. It's inappropriate for us to have too much contact." Her words were reasonable, polite and distant, completely drawing a clear line between them. Kaelan's heart was stabbed sharply by her alienated tone, and his brows tightened. "Layla, are you blaming me?" "I don't dare." Layla shook her head lightly. "I have no position to blame you. I was just a substitute you kept temporarily. Now the right person is back, and I should make way. Everything is reasonable." Every word she said was reasonable, but every word pierced Kaelan's heart. He stared at her calm and indifferent eyes, and suddenly lost his temper. "You were not like this before." "What was I like before?" Layla asked softly. "Humility, humble, clinging to you, looking at you with love all the time, waiting for your occasional tenderness." "Mr. Blackwood, those are all over." She smiled faintly, the smile clean and desolate. "I'm tired. I don't want to be a substitute anymore, and I don't want to love someone who doesn't love me." Kaelan's body stiffened, and his breathing suddenly became disordered. He wanted to refute, wanted to tell her that he actually had her in his heart, wanted to tell her that he didn't want her to leave. But his pride stopped him. He had insisted for 3 years that she was just a substitute, had hurt her countless times with cruel words, and had emphasized countless times that he only loved Isolde. Now he couldn't bow his head, couldn't admit his heart. The two fell into a long silence. Just as the atmosphere was deadlocked, Kaelan's mobile phone suddenly rang. It was a call from his most trusted private detective. Kaelan frowned and picked up the phone, his voice cold. "What's the matter?" The detective's urgent voice came from the other end of the phone. "Mr. Blackwood, we found out the truth about Miss Isolde's disappearance 3 years ago. It's not an accident, she left on her own initiative. Moreover, she has been living a very wealthy life abroad in the past 3 years, and she has been cooperating with your rival company, secretly stealing your group's business data." Boom. Like a thunderclap on a sunny day, Kaelan's whole body froze in place. His eyes widened suddenly, full of shock and disbelief. For 3 years, he had always thought that Isolde was forced to leave, that she had suffered a lot abroad, that she was the poor person who was trapped by fate. He had felt guilty for 3 years, missed her for 3 years, and even used Layla as a substitute to comfort his guilt. But the truth was completely opposite to what he thought. She left voluntarily. She had never suffered any hardship. She even colluded with his rivals to plot against his family property. "Are you sure the information is accurate?" Kaelan's voice was hoarse and trembling, with unprecedented shock and anger. "Absolutely accurate. We have found her overseas consumption records, cooperation contracts with rival companies, and all the evidence is complete. She came back this time not because she missed you, but because the overseas project failed, and she needed to rely on your Blackwood Group's resources to turn the tide." The detective's words completely shattered all of Kaelan's persistence over the years. It was all a lie. All Isolde's grievances, all her missing, all her difficulties, were all fake. She had been playing him like a fool all along. Kaelan slowly put down the phone, his whole body cold, his storm blue eyes dark and terrifying, filled with monstrous anger and ridiculous shame. He had missed a liar for 3 years, felt guilty for 3 years, and hurt the person who truly loved him for 3 years. He slowly turned his head, looking at Layla's quiet and calm face, and the pain in his heart spread wildly, almost drowning him. All this time, he had blinded himself with a ghost from his past, while the real, quiet love that had stayed loyal, devoted, and true was standing right in front of him, and he had crushed it beneath his cruel, arrogant delusions. 3 years of cold words, 3 years of deliberate humiliation, 3 years of forcing her to wear another woman's identity like a heavy chain. Every harsh command, every dismissive glance, every brutal reminder that she was nothing but a substitute crashed over him in a brutal, suffocating wave. His throat tightened painfully, his tall frame trembling faintly with suppressed rage and overwhelming remorse. The storm blue eyes that had always been cold and domineering were now bloodshot, swirling with a chaotic storm of anger, shame, and desperate regret. Layla noticed his strange reaction, but she felt no curiosity, no pity, no fluctuation in her calm heart. She simply closed the financial book in her hands slowly, her movements gentle and unhurried, as if the man beside her was nothing more than a passing stranger disturbing her peace. She stood up, preparing to walk past him and leave the cramped guest room, intending to find a quiet corner in the manor garden to spend the rest of the afternoon. She had no desire to participate in his chaotic emotional turmoil, no interest in his love and hatred, his truth and lies. Everything related to Kaelan Blackwood had long faded into insignificance in her world. But the moment she stepped forward, Kaelan suddenly reached out, his large palm firmly wrapping around her slender wrist. His grip was not rough, but it was tight, trembling uncontrollably, as if he was afraid that if he let go for a second, she would disappear completely from his life, vanishing into thin air like the mist after rain. Layla's footsteps halted. She lowered her eyes indifferently, glancing at his hand on her wrist, her tone cold and distant without a single trace of warmth. "Mr. Blackwood, let go." Her voice was calm, devoid of anger, grievance, or resistance, only a thorough indifference that cut deeper than any quarrel. This indifference was the sharpest knife, stabbing straight into Kaelan's broken heart. He raised his head slowly, his gaze locking tightly on her delicate, calm face. For the first time in 3 years, Kaelan Blackwood was at a loss, his voice hoarse and broken, stripped of all his usual arrogance and dominance. "Layla," he whispered her name, the syllables heavy with unspeakable regret. "I was wrong." A simple sentence, but it drained all his pride, all his stubborn obsession that he had clung to for years. Layla's eyelashes fluttered slightly, but there was no surprise on her face. She did not ask what he was wrong about, did not want to know the truth behind Isolde's return, did not care about the lies that had trapped him for 3 years. It was too late for apologies. The wounds of 3 years could not be healed by a single sentence of remorse. "There's no need for you to apologize to me." Layla pulled her wrist gently, her strength soft but firm, easily breaking free from his trembling grip. "We had no deal, no relationship that requires an apology. I stayed here for 3 years, because I had nowhere to go. Now I just want to leave peacefully." Peacefully. The word echoed in Kaelan's ears like a curse, making his chest ache violently, almost suffocating him. He did not want her peaceful departure. He did not want her to erase all traces of their 3 years together so thoroughly. He did not want to be reduced to a meaningless passerby in her life. "You can't leave." Kaelan's voice turned desperate, his usual domineering tone now laced with obvious panic. "Layla, don't leave me." For the first time in his life, the aloof, untouchable tycoon begged someone to stay. Layla let out a faint, bitter laugh, her eyes clear and icy. "Mr. Blackwood, you once told me countless times that I have no right to covet anything of yours, including your heart. Now you're begging me to stay. It's ridiculous." She took a step back, putting a safe distance between them, completely drawing a line over their past entanglement. "You loved Isolde for 3 years, missed her for 3 years, hurt me for 3 years. Now you know she's a liar, so you turn around and regret. Do you take my 3 years of love and suffering for a joke?" Her words were soft yet sharp, piercing every layer of his hypocritical persistence and self-deception. Kaelan's face turned pale inch by inch, his storm blue eyes filled with endless pain and self-loathing. He had no way to refute, no excuse to defend himself. Everything she said was the truth. He was the most ridiculous, most foolish man alive. "I know I hurt you badly." Kaelan stepped forward, wanting to approach her, wanting to hold her, to make up for all the past mistakes. "I'll make it up to you, Layla. I'll drive Isolde away immediately, cut off all ties with her, give you everything you want, status, wealth, my heart, everything. Just stay with me." "I don't want it." Layla interrupted him directly, her eyes devoid of any longing, any fluctuation. "I don't want your wealth, I don't want your status, and I don't want your belated, remorseful heart. Kaelan, I'm done loving you. Done loving you." 4 simple words completely shattered Kaelan's last hope. He froze in place, his whole body cold, as if falling into an endless ice abyss. The 3 years of silent love he had ignored, the 3 years of humble dedication he had trampled on, were completely gone forever. Just as the atmosphere was deadlocked and oppressive, the sound of high heels sounded clearly from the corridor outside. Isolde was back. She had changed into a new set of luxurious custom dress, her golden hair neatly styled, her face wearing a perfect and bright smile, looking elegant and noble from the outside. No one could tell that this glamorous woman was a scheming liar who had plotted against her lover for years. She walked to the guest room door, leaned lazily against the door frame, her eyes sweeping across the 2 people in the room, and a cold, mocking smile tugged at her red lips. "Wow, what a touching scene." Isolde's voice was lazy and sarcastic, full of disdain. "I just went out for a few hours, and you two are playing the bitter love drama. Kaelan, are you really falling for this little substitute?" Kaelan's body tensed instantly. The remorse and tenderness on his face vanished in a second, replaced by monstrous cold anger. He turned to stare at Isolde, his storm blue eyes dark and terrifying, like a furious beast staring at its enemy. Isolde felt the terrifying killing intent in his eyes, and her smile froze slightly, but she still pretended to be innocent and wronged, walking forward coquettishly. "Kaelan, why are you looking at me like this? Did this woman say something bad about me to you? She's always been jealous of me, jealous that I'm the one you love, jealous that I can replace her completely." "Shut up." Kaelan's voice was low and icy, cutting off her pretentious grievance directly. Isolde was stunned. She had never seen Kaelan so cold to her, even during their coldest days 3 years ago. "What did you say?" She frowned tightly, her eyes filled with disbelief and grievance. "Kaelan, how can you talk to me like this? I'm the one you've loved for years. She's just a fake substitute." "She is not a substitute." Kaelan interrupted her sharply, his every word heavy and powerful, carrying endless remorse and protection. He turned around, his tall figure firmly blocking Layla behind him, using his entire body to shield her from all malice and humiliation. For 3 years, he had always stood in front of Isolde, protecting his moonlight. Now, for the first time, he stood in front of Layla, protecting the love he had abandoned. "Isolde." Kaelan stared at her coldly, his eyes no longer containing a trace of love, only thorough coldness and disgust. "You are the fake one." Isolde's face paled instantly, her perfect smile completely collapsing, panic flashing in her eyes. "What are you talking about? I don't understand." "Don't understand." Kaelan let out a cold, mocking laugh, the sound piercing and cold. "You left voluntarily 3 years ago, colluded with my rivals, stole Blackwood's core data, lived a luxurious life abroad, and came back only because your project failed and you needed my resources. Do you want me to show you all the evidence?" Every sentence was a precise blow, smashing all her pretentious disguise to pieces. Isolde's body trembled violently, her face turning pale and bloodless in an instant. The panic in her eyes was completely exposed, and she could no longer maintain her noble and innocent posture. She never thought that Kaelan would find out the truth so quickly. She had spent 3 years arranging all disguises, covering up all traces of her conspiracy and betrayal, thinking that she could easily fool this man, who was obsessed with her, thinking that she could use his deep love to seize the Blackwood Group's resources and turn the tide of her failed career. But all her calculations were completely shattered overnight. "Kaelan, listen to me, it's not what you think." Isolde panicked instantly, stepping forward eagerly to grab his arm, her eyes red with fake tears. "I had difficulties. I was threatened back then. Those cooperations were forced. I never meant to betray you, I love you the most. Get your hands off me." Kaelan shook off her hand violently, his movements ruthless and cold, without any mercy. Isolde was thrown back a few steps, stumbling unsteadily, her eyes filled with shock, grievance, and unbelievable anger. "You love me, Dot. Kaelan's voice was cold and piercing, full of self-mockery. If you loved me, you would never let me suffer 3 years of guilt and longing. If you loved me, you would never use my feelings as a tool to plot against my family property. If you loved me, you would never humiliate the woman who stayed by my side silently for 3 years. He glanced at Layla behind him from the corner of his eye, his heart aching sharply again. All the humiliation Layla had endured, all the pain she had suffered, all the helplessness she had borne in these 3 years, were all because of his foolish obsession and this woman's vicious lies. Isolde stared at him in disbelief, her voice sharp and hysterical. So what? Even if I lied to you, even if I plotted against you, it's all because I love you. What about her? She's just a substitute who relies on my face to stay by your side. She's nothing without my face. This sentence completely touched Kaelan's bottom line. His eyes turned icy cold, and his aura became terrifyingly oppressive, the aura of a top tycoon who controlled countless interests, completely erupting. Shut your mouth. His tone was ruthless, without a trace of warmth. You are not qualified to insult her. From today on, you have nothing to do with me. I will freeze all your overseas assets, terminate all your cooperative projects, and let you pay for every lie and betrayal you have committed. Isolde's legs went weak, and she almost collapsed to the ground. She stared at Kaelan in horror, never expecting that the man, who had loved her obsessively for 3 years, would be so ruthless once he woke up. Kaelan, you can't do this to me. I love you. I've loved you for so many years, she screamed hoarsely, tears streaming down her face, trying to arouse his old affection. But Kaelan was completely unmoved. All his love and tenderness had been exhausted by her lies and betrayal long ago. What was left now was only endless disgust and coldness. Security. Kaelan raised his voice coldly, his tone decisive. 2 tall and uniformed bodyguards immediately appeared at the corridor door, respectfully waiting for his order. Escort Miss Isolde out of Blackwood Manor immediately. No entry for life. No one in the Blackwood group is allowed to have any contact with her in the future. Yes, sir. The bodyguards stepped forward immediately, one on each side, firmly holding Isolde's arms. Isolde struggled frantically, her face twisted with rage and panic. No. Kaelan, you can't drive me out. I'm the one you love. Layla, you bitch. You stole my everything. I won't let you go. Her hysterical abuse echoed in the corridor, sharp and ugly. Layla stood quietly behind Kaelan, her expression calm and unchanging, not affected by her abuse at all. She had long been indifferent to Isolde's provocation and hatred. The farce of the white moonlight was finally coming to an end. Under Isolde's desperate struggle and hysterical curses, the bodyguards forcibly dragged her out of the manor. The door of the manor was closed heavily, completely isolating this scheming and vicious woman from Blackwood's world. The corridor finally returned to dead silence. The noisy farce ended, leaving only Kaelan and Layla standing face to face in the empty guest room. The oppressive atmosphere lingered in the air, thick and heavy. Kaelan slowly turned around, all his coldness and ruthlessness fading away in an instant, leaving only endless tenderness, remorse, and flustered unease. He looked at Layla's calm and indifferent face, and his heart ached so badly that he could barely breathe. Layla, she's gone. He spoke softly, his voice humble and cautious, like a criminal waiting for judgment. No one will humiliate you again, no one will separate us. Can you give me a chance to make up for my mistakes? He was willing to abandon all his pride, all his status, just to keep her by his side. But Layla just shook her head gently, her eyes clear and cold, without a single ripple of forgiveness. Kaelan, you drove Isolde away not because of me, but because she betrayed you. Even if there was no me, you would abandon her once you knew the truth. She saw through his heart thoroughly. His remorse was not entirely for her, but for his foolish 3 years of persistence, for the feelings he had wasted on a liar. But I hurt you. Kaelan's voice was hoarse and desperate. I know I was wrong. I know I made you suffer. I'll change everything. I'll treat you well, love you only, spoil you for the rest of your life. Just don't leave me. He stepped forward slowly, carefully reaching out his hand, wanting to touch her face, but afraid of scaring her, his fingertips trembling slightly in mid-air. Layla tilted her head slightly, avoiding his touch easily. This avoidance was gentle yet decisive, completely breaking Kaelan's last glimmer of hope. I don't need your compensation, nor your love. Layla looked straight into his storm blue eyes, her tone firm and calm, without any hesitation. 3 years ago, I had no choice but to stay here. Now, I'm free. I've already booked a house in the city. I will leave Blackwood Manor tomorrow morning. From then on, we will have no intersection, no entanglement. You live your noble life, I live my ordinary life. It's the best ending for both of us. No entanglement, no contact, no love and hatred. This was the only ending she wanted. Kaelan's face turned completely pale, his tall body staggering back half a step, his eyes filled with overwhelming panic and loss. He had finally woken up from his foolish obsession, finally realized who the one worthy of his love was, but the person he wanted to cherish the most was determined to leave him. This was the cruelest punishment fate had given him. You hate me that much? He asked in a low voice, his voice trembling with unspeakable pain. I don't hate you. Layla smiled faintly, her eyes peaceful and empty. Hate requires emotion. I have no more emotion for you. Kaelan, I'm indifferent to you now. Indifferent. More ruthless than hatred, more desperate than resentment. Hatred means still caring, still having obsession. Indifference means complete letting go, thorough detachment. Kaelan stared at her peaceful face, and the pain in his heart spread wildly, devouring every inch of his reason. He knew she was telling the truth. The humble girl who loved him wholeheartedly, who waited for him late at night, who endured all grievances silently, was completely dead. The Layla standing in front of him now was reborn from the ashes of 3 years of pain. She no longer belonged to him. Can't you give me a single chance? Kaelan's voice was low and broken, the aloof tycoon completely collapsing in front of her. I'll wait for you. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait until you forgive me. Layla did not answer his question. She turned around directly, walked to the window, and looked at the clear blue sky outside, her expression relaxed and free for the first time in 3 years. I'm tired, Mr. Blackwood. Please leave my room. I want to rest. Her tone was gentle but unquestionable, a thorough final notice. Kaelan stood in place for a long time, staring at her slender back, his eyes filled with endless regret and helplessness. He knew he could not force her. All the mistakes were his own. All the endings were his own fault. After a long silence, he finally nodded slowly, his voice hoarse and dull. I'll go. I won't disturb you. But Layla, no matter where you go tomorrow, I will always be behind you. Whenever you need me, I'll be there. He took one last deep look at her back, engraving this figure deeply in his heart, then turned around and left the guest room slowly. The door closed gently, isolating the man's endless regret and longing outside the room. The room was completely quiet. Layla leaned against the window, staring at the distant sky, and finally let out a long, relaxed breath. The heavy shackles that had trapped her for 3 years were finally broken. No more substitution, no more humble love, no more painful entanglement. From tomorrow on, she was just Layla, free and independent, belonging only to herself. Outside the corridor, Kaelan stood motionless outside the door for a full hour. The wind in the corridor was cold, blowing his neat suit, but he felt no cold at all. His heart was empty, a huge void that could never be filled again. He had owned the most sincere love in the world, but he had abandoned it with his own hands. Now he was left with endless regret and a lifetime of chasing and redemption. The sunset fell on the long corridor, pulling his lonely figure extremely long. The man who had always been domineering and invincible finally tasted the bitterest consequence of his own cruelty. He had lost his moonlight, and he had ruined his starlight. All he had left was an endless, desolate dusk, and a lifetime of unrepayable remorse. Chapter 6: The Departure and the Crazy Redemption. The night fell quietly again. Blackwood Manor lost its previous noisy and ambiguous atmosphere, falling into a dead and lonely silence. Without Isolde's coquettish noise, without the trivial warmth of Layla's silent company, the huge luxurious manor was empty and desolate, like a gorgeous and empty shell. Kaelan did not go to the study to work all night. He stood quietly at the end of the third-floor corridor, guarding outside Layla's guest room door all night, never leaving a single step. He did not knock on the door, did not disturb her rest, just stood there silently, using his most humble way to guard the last trace of warmth left in his life. The night wind blew through the corridor window, cold and piercing, but he stood upright all night, his eyes never leaving the closed door for a second. He knew that tomorrow morning, she would leave here completely. Once she left, she would never come back. This thought made his heart ache constantly. Every second of the night was a torment of regret and longing. He recalled every detail of the 3 years in his mind over and over again. He recalled how she would quietly wait for him late at night no matter how late he came back, how she would prepare warm tea and hot meals for him on time every day, how she would endure his cold words and harsh temper silently, how she would look at him with bright and sincere eyes full of love. All the details that he had ignored and dismissed in the past now became sharp blades, cutting his heart into pieces over and over again. He was the biggest fool in the world. He chased a fake moonlight that was full of lies, and abandoned the most sincere starlight that belonged to him. The first ray of dawn broke through the night, spilling light into the quiet corridor. The long night of torment finally passed. The door of the guest room was gently pushed open. Layla walked out carrying a simple suitcase. She did not pack any luxurious clothes or expensive jewelry that Kaelan had given her for 3 years. She only took the few ordinary clothes she had when she first came here, leaving all the material gifts that carried humiliation and bondage. She was dressed in a clean white casual dress, her long hair neatly tied up, her face plain and delicate, without any makeup, bright and fresh, completely shedding the humble and restrained appearance of the past 3 years. She was reborn, clean and free. When she looked up and saw Kaelan standing at the end of the corridor with bloodshot eyes and a tired face, she had no extra fluctuation in her heart. She just glanced at him lightly, then withdrew her gaze, holding the suitcase and preparing to walk past him. Kaelan's body stiffened, and he immediately stepped forward, blocking her way. His eyes were red with fatigue and regret, his voice hoarse and dry after staying up all night. "Are you really leaving without a single hesitation?" Layla stopped, raised her eyes to look at him, her tone calm and indifferent. "I have no reason to stay, Mr. Blackwood." "I can give you reasons." Kaelan stared at her firmly, his eyes full of crazy persistence. "I can give you everything. I can change everything. I can love you with all my life." "Layla, don't go." His voice was humble and pleading, completely without the aura of a top tycoon. Layla shook her head gently, her eyes clear and firm. "It's too late, Kaelan. The time for you to cherish me has passed. When I was humble and clinging to you, you trampled on my love wantonly. Now that I've let go, your repentance is meaningless. Love is a timing game. Late love is cheaper than grass. No matter how sincere his repentance is now, no matter how crazy his retention is, it can't heal the wounds of 3 years. I know it's late. Kaelan's Adam's apple rolled violently, his eyes filled with pain, but I'm willing to spend the rest of my life making up for it. I don't ask you to forgive me immediately. I just ask you to give me a chance to accompany you, to guard you, to let you see my change. No need. Layla stepped sideways, bypassing his blocking, her footsteps steady and firm. I don't need your guardianship, and I don't want your compensation. I just want to live a quiet life alone. She walked forward step by step, getting farther and farther away from him. Every step she took was a thorough farewell to their 3 years of entanglement. Kaelan stood in place, watching her slender and decisive back, his heart empty and painful, almost collapsing. He wanted to rush forward to hold her, to lock her in the manor by force, to keep her by his side forever. But he didn't dare. He was afraid of making her hate him more, afraid of completely breaking the last trace of goodwill between them, afraid of letting her fall into pain and bondage again, because of his selfish retention. He had hurt her enough. He could no longer bring her any pain. Layla walked straight through the empty living room, past the luxurious crystal chandeliers that had witnessed her 3 years of grievance, past every corner of the manor that had trapped her youth, and finally walked out of the heavy gate of Blackwood Manor. The morning sun fell on her body, warm and bright. She raised her head slightly, looking at the vast blue sky, and a relaxed and genuine smile finally bloomed on her face. Free at last. No more cages, no more substitutes, no more unrequited love. She took a deep breath of fresh air, pulled her suitcase, and walked firmly towards the taxi parked at the roadside. Behind her, Kaelan stood at the manor gate, watching her figure leave, his tall body straight, but desolate, like a lonely statue abandoned by time. He watched her get in the car, watched the taxi start slowly, watched the car drive farther and farther, gradually disappearing at the end of the road. The whole world lost its color in an instant. The wind blew through his hair, cold and desolate. He raised his hand, covering his eyes, and for the first time in his life, the omnipotent Kaelan Blackwood fell into desperate and helpless tears. He had everything in the world: wealth, power, status, fame. But he lost the only person who loved him sincerely. From this day on, Blackwood Manor was prosperous and luxurious as always, but it was forever devoid of warmth. And Kaelan Blackwood began his endless, lifelong redemption. He gave up all social banquets, reduced all unnecessary work, and devoted all his time and energy to silently guarding Layla. He bought the apartment opposite Layla's new residence, lived alone in the quiet room, watched her figure through the window every day. He would quietly solve all the trivial troubles in her life, pay all her living expenses silently, help her deal with all the difficulties she encountered, but never appear in front of her, never disturb her peaceful life. He was like a silent guardian, hiding in the dark, using his own way to atone for his past sins. He knew that she didn't want to see him, so he chose to guard from afar. As long as she was safe and happy, as long as she lived freely and comfortably, it was enough for him. Even if this happiness had nothing to do with him. The sun rises and sets, the seasons change. Days passed quietly. Layla gradually adapted to her free new life. She enrolled in university, picked up her abandoned major, studied hard, made new friends, and lived a simple, fulfilling and happy life. Her eyes became bright and free again, no longer filled with humble longing and painful entanglement. She completely walked out of the shadow of Blackwood Manor, out of the pain of 3 years of unrequited love. While Kaelan was trapped in the past forever, living in endless regret and solitary redemption. The man who once held power over the world was finally trapped by his own love and sin, spending his whole life chasing a starlight that he had once abandoned. The ashen contract of love, woven by lies, obsession, and regret, finally bound him alone for a lifetime.